Microsoft podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Taylor. Today I'm joined with Jeff Rogers. How you doing today, Jeff?
I'm doing quite well. Thank you, Nathan.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to jump into a topic today that's real hot with the all the changes in the industry, which is um, you know uh, data center hardware and VMware alternatives. So today we're going to dig into Nutanix, and you're a bit of an expert on the topic, so I'm excited to pick your brain. I'm admittedly less of a Nutanix expert. I'm a little more Microsoft focused, so it'll be really fun for me to learn today. So thanks for jumping in on this today.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. I know the title of is demystifying Microsoft, and we have to take a little side to detour, demystify VMware at the moment as to what they've done in the
Absolutely.
marketplace. And we had you and I had a conversation in a similar type of format related to VMware, about 2 or 3 months ago. And we thought, man, we're on top of it. And then another month goes by and it changes more. Another month goes by and it changes more.
Yeah.
And I know that's one of the
Yeah.
reasons that, hey, let's jump back on this, because I mean, I'm talking to clients every day, literally, about VMware. And I thought maybe the curve was over. Like most people now finally knew that they had, changed their model from a perpetual license to a subscription. And by doing so, and bundling and everything else, all of a sudden they've got, 2 and 3 x invoices or quotes to keep going with VMware. So, but that's not the case, because everybody is at different stages of a 1 year agreement, 2 year agreement, 3 year agreement, 5 year agreement, even. And until your agreement is up, you're not faced with that decision of going, "Ooh, wait a minute. Do I pay two to
Yeah.
three times more just to stick what I've got, or do I look at the alternatives?" So the last time we got together, we explored some of the alternatives. And I think, well, maybe before we get there, let's update a little bit more. As it comes back to, I've learned that the clients that I talk to, it really depends on the size of the client, what we might talk about for alternatives. Because if you're a client who we have a lot of, just somewhere along the history of time, got 3 servers, 2 switches, 1 SAN, and put their virtualization together. And there's so many of those, the old 3-2-1 model, and there's still a lot in play today. And but if you're going to change, it's a wholesale replacement. Well, I'm not going to do VMware. Well, what are you going to do? And that comes with either wholesale replacement of hardware and everything else. But if you're talking to a large customer, somebody that's got 100 hosts and they've got 1,500 VMs, and they've got, well, there they can kind of pick and choose what they want to do. Well, let's keep a little of this on VMware while we try this one over here. Let's move this workload, or let's take this brand new one that hasn't even been, we don't even have to migrate it because it's a new project. Let's do that on Nutanix, or let's do that on one of the alternatives. So really, it is coming down to, this is horrible to say this, but not, one size doesn't fit all, but it is true. It just depends on time. The 3 things, I even wrote some notes here just in case, but the 3 things are, look, the size of the client and their environment, the timing of their renewal when it comes up, and also what their cloud strategy is. That's really big too, because if you've got, if you put some of your stuff into Azure, AWS, or wherever in the cloud, but you still kept some on-prem and you're using it with VMware, well, maybe there's a case to be made to just move it all to the cloud and just not even use the infrastructure at all anymore, the on-prem. And also, as your cloud strategy, do you feel that it's fairly ubiquitous? And that's what we'll talk a little bit more with Nutanix as well. Is it a cloud strategy where, are you just doing a vault of your data into a cloud that you someday have to rehydrate and bring back? Or are you actually building a hybrid model where you can run, and this is one of the ones I don't know if we'll touch on it further today, but like Azure on-prem, perfect example.
Azure Local. Yep.
Azure, thank you for the new name.
You're
I should
welcome.
do that. But yes, Azure Local, and being able to then have a strategy where I'm living between the two environments, not just for production and DR, but production in a whole, and moving those things. So those are the areas. And if you want to dig into more of Nutanix as one of those, be glad to do so.
Yeah, it's a great topic. It is appropriate for the Demystifying Microsoft podcast because so many of our customers have Windows servers. Windows Server is still all over the place, especially in the mid-market. They have dozens or hundreds of them, and they need a place to store them, to run them, to keep their workloads working. A lot of people have millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars invested into on-prem data centers or on-prem, colo locations, and they've got legacy hardware in there and legacy systems. And we know from experience that moving those to the cloud is not always seamless or cost effective or the right choice or scalable. And so there's a lot of people who, VMware has just always been the answer. Hey, just run VMware. It's easy. Yeah. It's cake. And now that is no longer the same option. It's become prohibitively expensive and complicated to renew. People are taking a chance to reevaluate that renewal. And I think also you have kind of the post-COVID timeframe, right? COVID was 2020, 2021. A lot of decisions were made during COVID to scale quickly for work from home to address that emergency at that time. Well, we're on that 5-year tail end of that. So there's a lot of hardware coming up for renewal. And so not only is your VMware license up for renewal, but now you got to look at hardware. And I think that's maybe where Nutanix really has some magic, right? If you're just, if you're piecemealing your system together, you've got a newer SAN and you got these servers and those switches, and you're just wanting that hypervisor. There's probably other tools in the market that are a better fit for fitting into your Frankenstein sort of environment of, hey, I got multiple pieces I've got to glue together, because that's not where Nutanix shines. But if, like you said, hey, I got to do a wholesale replacement of everything, that's where Nutanix does some stuff special. So tell me about what is unique and special about Nutanix.
All right. So I'm going to go backwards before I go forwards. I do realize that some people might be, tuning into this and for the first time didn't catch our one that we went before. But real quick, the world and virtualization has changed in a forceful way, and it changed because of Broadcom's acquisition, not just of VMware. VMware's been acquired before by Dell at one point in time and other things, and nothing changed. But in this particular case, they changed the world dramatically. And if you haven't felt it yet, you will. In fact, I just had a conversation this week with someone for the first time that goes, well, wait a minute, I bought perpetual licenses. What I don't understand. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I thought we've gone through the market on all this. But so there are still quite a bit of people that are paying it because it's easier to stay with something that and it works, and we'll just budget more money for it because it's the one to use. There's also people that have said, okay, well, we didn't have time to evaluate anything else, so we'll just go ahead and kind of kick the can down the road and pay for 1 year, and yet we're going to evaluate and figure out some way to change going forward. The good news is it has, in a sense, forced people to look at their infrastructure and really, are they doing the right thing at the right time? Just because the VMware stack that they have in place today, that was built or put in place, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, if it works, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But now they're forced to look at, okay, are there better alternatives to the current state of IT, right?
Yes.
So Nutanix has been around for a while. It's not some new name that just kind of came out of nowhere. They cut their teeth on VDI originally because it was a nice way to scale compute, storage, and the needs for, as you would for a very linear expansion. So that was the 10 years ago frame, 10, 12 years ago. I don't work for Nutanix, so don't, quote me on some exact dates and things like that. But they were a very viable alternative. It made, sometimes that linear scalability made it difficult for them to enter into the VMware virtualization and server market, even though they have a hypervisor that's built in. I'll put in air quotes. It's hard to see when I've got the blur on, but air quotes that it's free, but it's included. But it's a very, very robust hypervisor. But the problem is that you couldn't scale pieces and parts. If I'm in a server environment, I might have something that's really going nuts on storage, but I had to buy another brick, if you will, another node that had compute along with it, and might have driven up my VMware pricing even if I was going to run, which you could do at the time, run VMware on Nutanix. So they have a very viable place in the market, but now they've taken it to a whole nother, that sounded really bad, to a whole nother level, but I'm going to leave it in there anyway. And what it is I've looked at it for, hey, is this an alternative to VMware from a hypervisor standpoint? Absolutely it is. Is it an alternative? But deeper than that, Nutanix has been proliferating quite well for the last 10 years, growing, scaling,
Yep.
getting into more. And if you think about it, there's a reason beyond just the hypervisor for doing that. If you just went hypervisor for hypervisor, there's not necessarily a Nutanix
Right.
thing.
That
But
wasn't their
what it
claim to
is,
fame. Yeah, for sure.
if you take a look at what it is now, and then and even myself having to be more immersed in these conversations with the opportunities that are out there, they don't even talk about the VMware issue or the VMware problem. They talk about, hey, we've now built this with ransomware detections built into it. We've got advanced notifications of things that are all security. So they've gone deep into the security stack, which is what you would expect and hope from a company that's growing in this IT marketplace. And then beyond security, they've delved into this hybrid cloud, and they've really embraced it. Whether you're using or want to use or even care which one it is, whether it's AWS or Microsoft, they've got platforms now that run in the cloud environment. So now you can run a Nutanix, replace your on-prem if that's the case. You put in the Nutanix, you can actually run either a vaulting into the cloud, or you can run production so that you can flip over to the cloud in the event of DR. So way beyond what the hypervisor does to you,
Yeah.
Nutanix is an extremely viable option for many types of businesses, sizes from small school districts up to media and entertainment. I mean, it's a wide range for Nutanix. And then
Yeah.
the other thing that is big is that, yeah, the hypervisor is what is the level that most people use of what VMware offers. Meaning you're not having to take any shortcuts or, oh, it doesn't do vMotion or it doesn't do this.
It
It
does
does all
everything. Yeah.
it does
Yeah.
all of it. We just have
Yeah.
never, as most users in the country, really haven't taken a deep look at it because once again, we've got VMware, it's in place. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yep.
So, but now that you're forced into really evaluating if VMware is the best solution for you going forward. Now that you kind of have to, now that the companies like Nutanix can not only talk about their hypervisor, but all the other stuff that they do. Because you and I, Nathan, when you and I are into drawing on the whiteboards and coming up with solutions for clients, we don't draw anything today that doesn't include something to do with the cloud. Even if you're an on-premise, thing, we don't draw anything that doesn't have anything to do with security because that's what we're living around. If the fact is that we can look at a solution like Nutanix and it also includes my hypervisor cost, ooh, now you got something there.
Yeah.
I would not suggest Nutanix necessarily straight one-for-one replacement if you just last year went out and refreshed all your
Yep.
hardware and spent, how many ever hundreds of thousands on new storage and new servers. Nutanix does run as a software on top of any major manufacturer platform. So it's not like you have to buy Nutanix hardware, which is basically an OEM white box, because Nutanix will also run just as effectively on Dell servers and just as effectively on HPE servers. So, and then their relationship that they have now with Microsoft and running Nutanix in the cloud and having that ubiquitous relationship just makes it something compelling for everybody to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's interesting about Nutanix is as I was digging in doing some research, because as I said, I'm a little bit of a Nutanix
Sure.
noob. I knew about the brand, I knew they existed, but it's not something I dealt with before last year or so. Their real claim to fame was they moved into the world when, 10 years ago, and even now, you got your Dell servers running VMware hypervisor, but then you got Cisco switches running your SAN, and you got a nimble storage on that SAN. And anytime you had to change something and something broke, the storage guys were pointing at the network guys. The network guys were pointing at the server guys. Server guys were pointing at the VMware hypervisor guys. You have 4 different, stakeholders, 4 different vendors, 4 different sets of hardware, 4 different management tool. You got your Cisco management stack, your nimble management stack. And not only did that cause issues with troubleshooting and scaling, but it actually starts to decrease performance because you're not in a holistic, well-designed system. And Nutanix came around and said, we're going to manage everything. One console, we manage storage, networking, and the hypervisor together. It's this hyper-converged, which is a phrase that was very popular for a while, but it's this idea that they manage everything. And it really gives you some performance capabilities that you don't get from the individual things. I've read anywhere from 20 to 80% more efficient on hardware running Nutanix because it controls everything. The other big advantages over VMware is, it's built, it has its own hypervisor, you said, but it's built on KVM, which is the Linux open source virtualization tool. But nobody wants to manage CentOS or KVM. We don't have a bunch of Linux guys who can patch it, maintain it. So they took that problem and took it on themselves, but you're running open source software at its root, which means it's really stable, really well tested, really trustworthy, used by billions of servers across the world between Google and AWS and all these big players. They use KVM every day, so it's really well tested. And then on the hypervisor side, the logs in the state on VMware is held in memory. So you're requiring on syslog for troubleshooting, like you got to make sure you have logging set up properly on VMware, whereas KVM runs on disk. So if you have any sort of issue, there's a controller server on every host, and that server keeps track of logs to disk, which means you have much better capabilities to troubleshoot and see things like security than you do even on VMware. So lots of interesting advantages to the stack. As I was reading, it looks real. Like there's some real compelling reasons to look at it as an alternative to especially if you're replacing all the components of your stack.
Well, it's interesting. In fact, just yesterday, I was in a meeting with the Nutanix and with a large media corporation, and we all thought as Nutanix is a play for that hyper-converged architecture. That is absolutely where they've made their bread and butter, and everything else is and then the hypervisor part of it, because most of us in our daily lives, that's what we're thinking about is what are we going to do for the virtualization. But in this particular instance, it had nothing to do with that. I guess I was a bit naive to understand the level of sophistication that Nutanix has developed in the object store space. And so when we're talking about file system and object store at the petabytes level, they ended up having a perfect situation for that. It has nothing to do with the hypervisor because they can add global namespace on the fly, in a sense, whether you've got a couple of petabytes going up from there. Usually you're a client that's got at least 100 terabytes of data or more. But in that petabyte scale, that's one of the biggest problems that we've had always is how do we scale that the open file name system to the nth degree and the degree that people need for. So I think for me, what that did is really added to the fact that I've had not a single client that has Nutanix ever take it out or complain. And once again, I'm not making a sales pitch for Nutanix. Sure. I'm just making an observation, right? An observation is, hey, this stuff really is made, it's prime time. It works amazingly. And the people that have it love it. But above and beyond that, to know that that company is not just supporting our customers with the need for virtualization and need for cloud and all the things we already discussed, but also on that next level up, going to petabytes of scale with object and file is just, to me, it rounds out and solidifies that these guys are going to be around for quite a long time. Nobody has to worry about, well, VMware, if I have that, I know it's not going anywhere. Well, it might not be going anywhere, but it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. But Nutanix is far beyond that threshold of being a new player in the market. And that depth of product line is quite amazing.
Yeah, that ability to scale that object namespace to the cloud
Yes.
incredible, where you can add that cloud as to part of that storage. They have native migrations from VMware. It's built in. Native migrations to Azure. It's built in. So you need to move stuff around. It's natively supported. You're not, a lot of these other tools, you have to use a third party to get workloads moved in and out. Nutanix supports it natively. So really scalable, really powerful stuff. And I think a really compelling solution for those scenarios that fit it. But as you said, I love our ability to kind of come at it from multiple directions. We're talking about HP. We're talking about Nutanix today. We've talked a little bit about Azure Local in the past. We'll have some more conversations about that in the future. Our next conversation will be about HPE Morpheus. I know you've been sitting in a lot of information about that product. Why don't you give me a quick, the quick high level 30,000 foot view of what you're learning about that product, because it's moving quickly on the HPE side.
Well, and I'll give you some context on it because, as I mentioned, I was in some meetings where people are putting together budgets today that they are not going to spend until 2026. And by wintertime or January of 2026, things are going to change continually because the market is trying to fill this hole, this void that VMware has created. And HPE is one of those. I went to their HPE Discover conference a couple of weeks ago in Las Vegas. Got to sit and talk to the product manager for HPE Morpheus because me being an engineer by trade as well, I got to know that this stuff works before we're going to talk about it, right?
Yes.
And I had heard from my buddies that were at HPE, the sales guys will tell you it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. You can sell it tomorrow. It's wonderful. And you talk to the engineering field SEs and they're like, I wouldn't touch that yet, for production. Now that was 3 months ago. And even just in 3 months, the amount of engineering that's gone into a product like they took HPE Morpheus, the street name now, or the product name is called VM Essentials, which sounds like the old VMware Essentials name. But anyway, it's called VM Essentials. It is now out and ready. It has storage vMotion. It has actual VM vMotion built into it, and it's about a third the cost per core than VMware is. So there are some viable alternatives. Am I going to put it into an environment where I've got DRS running and I've got no, probably not. Probably not for another 6 months. But I had to tell this client that was putting in his budget numbers that put it in for VMware, but by the time you're going to need to deploy this, and they're kind of an HP shop anyway, they had asked HPE if they could quote the VMware OEM licenses, and HPE can no longer, nor can any of the big guys even quote VMware licensing. Just so you know, that's a new thing within the month that just came out. There's a lot of changes to the partners, a lot of changes to the marketplace, and who can sell it and everything else. But the product for HPE, after I've spoken to the people I have and talked to some of the key engineers, even in distribution, that are evaluating it, is that it is ready for your typical, there's my air quotes again, small virtualization implementation. When you've got 2 or 3 hosts, you've got to run it with some common storage, probably a couple switches, that it is ready for that today. And by the time we get to January next year, their roadmap shows a very like-for-like relationship with typical VMware installations, and a very
awesome.
Effective. So there's your quickie on that particular product as well.
Beautiful. It's a great opportunity we have here. We have multiple options. We can get you into Azure Local, Nutanix, HPE Morpheus. We can help you navigate some of the VMware renewal stuff, kind of talk you through that. Even though it's very difficult for people to buy now, we can at least help you understand what you're looking at. So you're looking at, as you said, budgets. A lot of people are setting budgets now for 2026. Reach out. We'd love to walk you through your options, talk you through that hybrid cloud, talk you through the best way to maximize your dollars. And we'd love to help you out with that. Just hit our website, sourcepassmcoe.com. Hit the contact us. Let us know what you're looking for. We'll get Jeff and some of our smart guys on the call with you and just dig into opportunities on that front. Any closing thoughts for us, Jeff, on this topic?
Well, me. You give me an open-ended question, we might be here for another 20 minutes. But I think I'll just reiterate some of the things you said. There are alternatives that are starting to become viable in the marketplace. Some of them have already been viable, such as Nutanix, but the right use case maybe not had come along yet, or the driver for someone to evaluate it. But if you want to look at the Nutanix, and you do want to have a conversation on it outside of the talking to a Nutanix rep, if you want someone that's a little bit more impartial, be glad to have those conversations and think about it as solving maybe 2 or 3 problems at the same time, not just the VMware cost problem, but also the ransomware world that we all live in now with cybersecurity, and then also living in that ubiquitous, I want to emphasize the word ubiquitous, relationship between on-prem and the cloud. So
absolutely.
I'd be glad to talk to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. Appreciate you jumping in and digging into this topic. Like I said, in a couple of weeks, we'll dig into Azure Local.
Okay.
Might pull in another nerd onto that call. So we might have a special guest or two on that call. We got some friends in the industry who have really dug into that product and can share some cool stuff. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe the podcast on LinkedIn, YouTube, share it with people. We're excited to share our knowledge here and just have a lot of fun nerding out with you guys on the Demystifying Microsoft podcast. And we look forward to catching you on the next one. Thanks for joining us and have a great weekend.
Thanks, Nathan.